The morning light filtered through my kitchen window as I arranged the last of the pastel cupcakes on their tiered stand. Everything had to be perfect. After 3 failed IVF attempts and years of watching friends announce pregnancies, while I smiled through gritted teeth, this baby shower felt like a miracle finally arriving. My name is Elena. I'm 33 years old and an elementary school teacher, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The backyard looked like something from a magazine, with soft pink and yellow balloons tied to every chair, delicate floral arrangements Maya had helped me make the night before, and tables covered in cream linens that caught the afternoon breeze just right. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Derek came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my growing belly. "You did amazing, babe," he whispered into my ear. "Everyone's going to love this." And for a moment, I let myself sink into his warmth, forgetting the small tensions that had been building between us lately. The way he'd been staying late at the office more often, the phone calls he'd take in the other room, the distant look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. But today wasn't about that. Today was about celebrating this little miracle growing inside me after 6 years of marriage and countless tears over negative pregnancy tests. Guests started arriving at 2 o'clock sharp. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, with her famous spinach dip, my college roommate, Jennifer, who'd driven 3 hours just to be here, my mother, Nina, bustling around, making sure everyone had drinks, and finding reasons to touch my belly every few minutes. "I still can't believe my baby is having a baby," she kept saying, her eyes misting up the way they had ever since I'd called to tell her the news. Derek worked the crowd like the natural salesman he was, shaking hands with my father's old work friends, charming my teacher colleagues with stories about my pregnancy cravings, and making everyone laugh when he demonstrated how I'd been talking to my belly at night. Maya arrived right on time, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift and wearing the knowing smile she'd had since high school when she could read my moods better than I could myself. "How are you holding up?" she asked, pulling me aside near the rose bushes. "You look radiant, but also like you might throw up from nerves." I laughed because she wasn't wrong. The anticipation of finally having this moment had been building for weeks, and now that it was here, I felt almost dizzy with joy and relief. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, like this is too good to be true. Maya squeezed my hand. "Nothing's going wrong today, Elena. This is your day, and you deserve every second of happiness." By 3:30, everyone had arrived except Carla, which wasn't surprising since my sister had never met a party she couldn't arrive fashionably late to. I was starting to think about beginning the gift opening when I heard her laugh echoing from the front yard, that particular pitched giggle she used when she wanted everyone to know she had arrived. Turning toward the gate, I watched her make her entrance wearing a flowing navy blue dress that was unusually conservative for her typical style. Usually, Carla favored tight clothes that showed off her figure, but today she looked almost modest, even demure as she air-kissed her way through the crowd, accepting compliments on her outfit and explaining she'd been at the salon all morning. Sorry, I'm here now," she announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know I wouldn't miss my big sister's special day." She pulled me into a hug that felt just a little too tight, a little too performative, and I caught a whiff of her perfume mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. Maya appeared at my elbow with a glass of sparkling cider. "Carla, you look different today," she said, with that deceptively casual tone she used when she was fishing for information. "That dress is gorgeous on you, very elegant." I watched my sister's face carefully as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. "Oh, this old thing? I just wanted to dress appropriately for such an important family event." As Carla moved through the party, I noticed things I might have missed if I wasn't already feeling hyper-aware. The way she politely declined the champagne Mom offered, saying she was driving, even though she'd never worried about that before. How she wrinkled her nose at the shrimp cocktail she usually devoured, and stepped away when Mrs. Chen offered her the spinach dip, claiming she'd eaten a big lunch. But Maya caught my eye across the yard, and I could tell she was cataloging the same details, her expression shifting from polite party guest to quiet investigation mode, the way it had in college when she suspected our roommate was lying about something. "All right, everyone," Mom called out, clapping her hands together. "Let's gather around so Elena can open her gifts." I settled into the chair Derek had positioned in the center of the circle, feeling the warm afternoon sun on my shoulders and the gentle weight of all these eyes on me, all these people who loved me and this baby already. Carla positioned herself directly opposite me, where everyone could see her expressions, her reactions. And I felt that familiar flutter of unease that had followed our relationship for years. The sense that even at my most important moments, she needed to be part of the spotlight. Maya handed me the first gift, a beautifully wrapped box from my school principal, and as I carefully untied the ribbon, I felt Carla's eyes on me, not warm and supportive, the way everyone else's were, but calculating, almost hungry, like she was waiting for something. The room filled with appreciative murmurs as I lifted out a handmade baby blanket embroidered with little elephants, and I held it up for everyone to see. "It's beautiful, Mrs. Rodriguez. Thank you so much." But even as I smiled and accepted hugs, I could feel tension building in the air, like the pressure before a storm. Carla shifted in her seat, clearing her throat in that pointed way she had when she was about to say something important. The gift opening continued, with each present bringing squeals of delight from the assembled women, tiny clothes and blankets, bottles and toys, books about motherhood and parenting guides, Derek documenting everything with his phone, Maya helping me keep track of who gave what for thank you notes later. But through it all, I felt Carla's restless energy building, like she had something she was bursting to say. Finally, as I reached for the last gift, a large box wrapped in silver paper, Carla cleared her throat again, louder this time, and the room gradually fell quiet, everyone turning to look at her expectantly. "Before Elena opens that last present," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the backyard, "I think there's something everyone should know, something I can't keep quiet about anymore." My hands froze on the silver ribbon, and I felt my stomach drop because I knew that tone. I'd heard it before, when Carla was about to blow up someone's life for reasons that made sense only to her. Maya tensed beside me, and Derek looked up from his phone with confusion written across his face. Mom started to say something, but Carla held up her hand. "No, Mom, this is important. Elena deserves to know the truth, and so does everyone else who loves her. Derek's been having an affair." The words hit the backyard like a physical force, sucking all the air out of the space and leaving nothing but shocked silence and the sound of Mrs. Chen's glass hitting the ground where it shattered into pieces that caught the afternoon sunlight. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, seeing my own face drain of color, seeing Derek's mouth fall open, seeing my mother's hand fly to cover her heart, seeing Maya's body go rigid with protective anger. But Carla wasn't finished. She was just getting started, her voice gaining strength and conviction as she continued. "I overheard him last week on the phone with someone named Sophia, talking about their hotel stay, about how they needed to be more careful about meeting up." She looked directly at me with what I would later recognize as false sympathy, but in that moment just felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "I'm sorry, Elena. I know this isn't how you wanted to find out, but I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't watch you celebrate while he's been lying to your face for months." The words seemed to echo across the yard, bouncing off the trees and the house and drilling into my skull where they would replay on an endless loop for days to come. Around me, I could hear the sharp intake of breath from Jennifer, the whispered, "Oh my God," from someone behind me, the scraping of chairs as people shifted uncomfortably, not knowing whether to look at me or Derek or Carla or anywhere else that might feel safe. Derek shot to his feet so fast his chair nearly toppled. "That's not what that was, Carla. You don't know what you're talking about." But his voice had that defensive edge that made him sound guilty even when he wasn't. And I could see the doubt creeping into the faces around us, the way people were exchanging glances and whispering behind their hands. "I know what I heard, Derek." Carla's voice was getting stronger, more confident, like she was feeding off the chaos she'd created. "You said you loved spending time with her, that the hotel had been perfect, that you couldn't wait to see her again." She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my skin crawl, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Elena, honey, I'm so sorry, but I couldn't keep the secret anymore. Not when you're about to have his baby. Not when everyone thinks he's this perfect husband." Mom finally found her voice. though it came out as barely a whisper. "Carla, this isn't the time or place for this kind of accusation." But her protest sounded weak, even to my ears, and I could see she was looking between Derek and me, trying to read the truth in our faces. Nina had always been terrible at confrontation, preferring to smooth things over rather than deal with messy realities. But this was too big to smooth over, too public to pretend away the damage. The damage was already spreading through the gathering like ripples in a pond. Derek ran his hands through his hair, that gesture he made when he was frustrated or cornered. "Elena, you have to believe me. This is not what this sounds like. Sophia is my coworker. Yes, we traveled together for the conference, but nothing happened." But his explanation felt flimsy, rehearsed, like he'd been preparing for this conversation. And that realization hit me harder than Carla's original accusation, because it meant some part of this was true. Some part of my husband's life had become secret enough that he'd been practicing his defense. I tried to stand, but my legs felt unsteady, and Maya was immediately beside me, offering her arm for support. The baby chose that moment to kick hard against my ribs, as if responding to the stress flooding my system, and I pressed my hand to my stomach protectively. "I need a minute," I managed to say, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "I just need a minute to think." But how do you think when your entire world has just been rewritten in front of 20 people who came to celebrate your happiness? "Elena, please don't let her do this to us." Derek's voice followed me as I started toward the house. "You know Carla. She loves drama. She's always trying to stir up trouble between us." And there was truth in that. Carla had never liked Derek, had made comments over the years about how he wasn't good enough for me, how I could do better, but I'd always attributed it to protective sister instincts, never imagining it might be coming from a place of knowledge rather than suspicion. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of voices rising as people tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Jennifer asking Maya what she should do, Mrs. Chen wondering if she should leave, Mom trying to get people to stay calm and give us privacy. But the privacy was already gone. The moment had been shattered, and there was no putting it back together, no pretending this hadn't happened, no returning to the joy I'd felt just minutes earlier when my biggest worry was whether we had enough ice for the drinks. Carla's voice carried clearly as I reached the patio door. "I know this is hard to hear, but Elena needed to know. Derek, you can't just deny your way out of this. I saw the hotel receipts in your jacket pocket when you were here last month." And that detail hit me like another blow, because it meant she'd been snooping through Derek's things when they were in our house, meant she'd been carrying this information around, waiting for the right moment to detonate it. And what could be more perfect than my baby shower, the day I was supposed to feel most loved and supported? As I stepped inside the cool darkness of my house, I could hear Derek's voice getting louder, more desperate. "You went through my pockets, Carla. What the hell is wrong with you? Elena, please don't listen to her. She's been weird lately. Something's going on with her." But his words felt distant now, like they were coming from underwater. And all I could focus on was the way my heart was hammering against my ribs and the sick feeling spreading through my stomach that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with the possibility that my life was not what I thought it was. Last 5 minutes by expelling them from my system. But when I looked up at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, pale and shaken and alone in a way that felt deeper than just being in an empty room. I was alone in my marriage, alone in my family, alone with a baby growing inside me and no idea what came next. I locked the bedroom door behind me and sat heavily on the edge of my bed, listening to the muffled chaos continuing in the backyard through my window. The voices had died down, but I could still hear people moving around, chairs scraping against the patio, someone loading dishes, and the occasional burst of whispered conversation that I was probably better off not hearing. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, but I ignored it, knowing it was probably Derek trying to explain, or Mom trying to manage the situation, or maybe even Carla wanting to continue her performance of concerned sisterly duty. A soft knock on the door made me look up. "Elena, it's me." Maya's voice was gentle but urgent. "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, then got up to unlock the door because if anyone could help me make sense of this nightmare, it would be Maya. She slipped inside, quickly closing the door behind her, and I saw she was carrying 2 glasses of water and wearing the expression she'd had in college when she was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear but needed to know. "How bad is it out there?" I asked, sinking back onto the bed, and Maya set the water glasses on my dresser before sitting beside me. "Well, Mrs. Chen left after she cleaned up her broken glass. Jennifer's pretending to help your mom pack up the food, but she's obviously just staying to get more information. And Derek's pacing around the backyard like a caged animal, insisting to anyone who will listen that Carla's lying." She paused, studying my face carefully. "The question is, what do you think, Elena? Do you believe her?" That was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself, because the answer was complicated. Derek had been distant lately, working longer hours, taking more business trips, being evasive about his schedule in ways that had made me vaguely uneasy. But I'd attributed it to work stress, or maybe just the normal changes that happen in a marriage when you're dealing with fertility struggles and pregnancy anxiety. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Part of me wants to say Carla's just being Carla, stirring up drama because she can't stand not being the center of attention. But some of the details she mentioned, the hotel receipts, the phone calls, they sound too specific to be completely made up." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That's what worries me too, Elena. Your sister has never been subtle when she's lying. She usually goes way over the top with dramatic details that don't add up. But this felt different, more calculated." She picked up one of the water glasses and handed it to me. "Plus, there's something else I've been noticing today. Something that might explain why she chose now to drop this bomb on you." I took a sip of water, grateful for something to do with my hands. "What do you mean?" "Carla's been acting strange all afternoon, avoiding the champagne, which you know she never does, turning down food, claiming she ate a big lunch, but I saw her in the kitchen earlier and she definitely didn't eat anything." Maya's voice was getting quieter, like she was sharing a secret. "Plus that dress, Elena. When has your sister ever worn something that conservative, that flowing to a party? She usually loves to show off her figure, but today she's covered up from neck to ankles." The observation hit me like a puzzle piece clicking into place, because Maya was right. Carla had always been the sister who wore the lowest cut tops, the shortest skirts, the tightest jeans. She loved attention, especially male attention, and dressed accordingly. But today, she looked almost demure, which was so unlike her that I should have noticed immediately. "You think she's hiding something?" I said. And Maya nodded. "I think your sister is hiding something big, and I think she wanted to create enough chaos today to make sure no one would be paying attention to her." My phone buzzed again, and this time I looked at it, seeing Derek's name on the screen with a text that read, "Elena, please let me explain. The Sophia thing is not what Carla made it sound like. Yes, we stayed at the same hotel for the conference, but nothing happened. I swear on our baby's life, nothing romantic happened between us." I showed the text to Maya, who read it with a frown. Notice how he's being very specific about nothing romantic happening, but he's not denying that something happened. That distinction sent a chill through me, because Derek was usually more straightforward in his denials. When he was completely innocent, he would say flat out that nothing happened at all. But this careful parsing of words suggested there was more to the story, even if it wasn't the affair Carla had described. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Maya, feeling more lost than I had since the day I got my first negative pregnancy test after we'd been trying for months. "I think you should take some time to process this before you make any decisions," Maya said firmly. "Don't let Derek pressure you into accepting his explanation right away, and definitely don't let your mother convince you to just forget and move forward for the sake of family harmony. You deserve to know the whole truth, Elena, not just the version that makes everyone else comfortable." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where I could see Derek still pacing while Mom directed the cleanup. "There's something else, Elena. I want to keep an eye on Carla for the rest of today, see how she acts when she thinks no one's watching her. If I'm right about what she's hiding, then she's going to be nervous about pulling this off. And nervous people make mistakes. She turned back to me with that determined expression I remembered from our college days when she'd decided to investigate whether our roommate was stealing money from our grocery fund. "What exactly do you think she's hiding?" I asked, though part of me already suspected where Maya's thoughts were heading. "I think your sister is pregnant, Elena, and I think she's been hiding it, which would explain the conservative outfit, the food aversion, the alcohol avoidance, maybe even the timing of her big revelation about Derek."
Maya sat back down beside me. Think about it. If she's pregnant and trying to keep it secret, then causing a huge family drama would be the perfect distraction. The idea was so shocking that I almost laughed, except nothing about this day was funny anymore. "But she would have told us, Maya. Carla doesn't keep secrets. She tells everyone everything. That's her whole personality." But even as I said it, I realized that wasn't entirely true. Carla kept secrets when they served her purposes, when revealing them too early might diminish their impact, or when she was planning some dramatic reveal for maximum effect. "Unless she has a reason to keep this particular secret," Maya said gently. "Like maybe the timing is inconvenient, or maybe there's something complicated about who the father is." And with those words, the pieces of a much larger and more devastating puzzle began to arrange themselves in my mind. Because if Carla was pregnant and hiding it, and if she knew details about Derek's hotel stays that she shouldn't know, then maybe the affair accusation wasn't just about deflecting attention from her own secret. Maybe it was about deflecting attention from a secret they shared. Outside, I could hear Derek calling my name, asking me to please come out and talk to him. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Wasn't ready to look at my husband and try to determine which version of the truth he was telling me while my sister's words echoed in my head and Maya's suspicions took root in my thoughts. "Let's go back out there," I said finally, "but let's watch Carla carefully, like you said, and see what else we can figure out, because I have a feeling this day is far from over." When Maya and I returned to the backyard, I forced my face into what I hoped looked like composure, though inside I felt like I was made of glass and one wrong word might shatter me completely. The remaining guests had formed small clusters around the patio, some still lingering by the gift table, others helping Mom pack up the food, but all of them stealing glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and curiosity that made my skin crawl. I could practically feel their questions hanging in the air like humidity, pressing down on everything. Carla had positioned herself near the dessert table, surrounded by Jennifer and two of my teacher colleagues who were hanging on her every word as she played her role of concerned sister to perfection. "I just couldn't keep it to myself anymore," she was saying, her voice carrying just enough to make sure I could hear. "Elena deserves so much better than this, and with the baby coming, I felt like I had to speak up." She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though I noticed no actual tears, and the gesture looked as rehearsed as everything else about her performance today. Derek stood alone by the fence, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at his phone with the kind of intense focus that meant he was avoiding eye contact with everyone. I watched him scroll through something, then type rapidly, his jaw clenched tight in frustration. Every few seconds, he would glance up at the group around Carla, then back at his phone, like he was fighting the urge to march over there and continue defending himself, but smart enough to know it would only make things worse. Maya touched my elbow gently. "Watch her hands," she murmured so quietly only I could hear. And I followed her gaze to see Carla absently pressing her palm against her stomach in a protective gesture I'd seen countless pregnant women make without thinking about it. The movement was subtle, lasting only a few seconds before she caught herself and moved her hand to smooth her dress instead. But Maya had caught it, and now that I was looking for it, I could see other things too. The way Carla kept shifting her weight from foot to foot like she was uncomfortable, the way she'd positioned herself so the table partially blocked the view of her midsection. "Elena, honey, how are you holding up?" Mrs. Chen appeared at my side with genuine concern written across her weathered face. "That was quite a shock for everyone. I'm sure you need time to process." She patted my arm gently. "If you need anything at all, you just call me, dear. And don't you worry about cleaning up today. Maya and I can handle all of this." Her kindness made my throat tight because it felt like the first genuine emotion I'd encountered since Carla's bomb had exploded my afternoon. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That means so much to me."
I managed to say, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. I think I just need some time to figure things out. She nodded understandingly and moved away to continue helping with cleanup, but not before shooting a disapproving look in Carla's direction that told me exactly what she thought of my sister's timing and methods. Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a casserole dish that someone had brought, looking frazzled and older than she had this morning. Elena, we need to talk about how to handle this. People are going to have questions, and we need to present a united front. The phrase made me want to laugh hysterically because there was nothing united about our front right now. Nothing that could be presented as anything other than the disaster it was. What exactly are you suggesting, Mom? I asked, and I heard the edge in my own voice, the first hint of the anger that was building beneath the shock and hurt. That we pretend Carla just accused my husband of cheating in front of 20 people? That we all smile and act like this is just some family misunderstanding? Mom's face flushed, and she glanced around nervously to see if anyone was listening. I'm suggesting we don't make this worse than it already is, Elena. Your sister was trying to protect you. Maya stepped closer to me, and I felt her support like a shield. Mrs. Nina, I think Elena needs to focus on taking care of herself and the baby right now, not on managing everyone else's comfort with this situation. Her voice was polite but firm, and I saw Mom's expression tighten the way it always did when someone challenged her version of how things should be handled. This is a family matter, and we'll handle it as a family.
Of course, Maya replied smoothly. But Elena is family too, and her well-being should be the priority here. The subtle emphasis on Elena's name was pointed enough that Mom couldn't miss it, and I watched her process the implication that maybe, just maybe, her daughter's needs should come before everyone else's desire to sweep things under the rug and pretend they hadn't happened. Across the yard, I noticed Carla had moved away from her audience and was now standing near the back gate, talking quietly with Derek, their heads bent together in what looked like an intense conversation. My stomach clenched as I watched them because there was something familiar about their body language, something that suggested this wasn't the first private conversation they'd had recently. When Derek glanced up and saw me watching, he immediately stepped back from Carla, but the damage was done. I'd seen enough to confirm that whatever was going on between them, it went deeper than just her overhearing a phone call. I think it's time for people to start leaving, I announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Thank you all so much for coming and for the beautiful gifts, but I'm feeling tired and need to rest. It was the polite way to end the disaster, but everyone understood the real message, which was that I needed space to deal with whatever came next. Jennifer immediately started gathering her things while shooting sympathetic looks in my direction. Mrs. Chen began efficiently stacking dishes, and Maya moved smoothly into hostess mode, helping people find their purses and jackets. As guests began trickling toward the front yard with promises to call later and offers to help with anything I needed, I kept my eyes on Carla, who was now helping Mom pack up leftover food, her movements careful and deliberate like she was thinking about each gesture. But when she thought no one was looking, I caught her pressing both hands to her lower back and stretching in a way that sent a chill of recognition through me, because I'd been doing the exact same thing for weeks as my own body adjusted to pregnancy. Derek approached me cautiously as the last guest disappeared around the side of the house. Elena, we need to talk about what Carla said. I can explain everything if you'll just give me a chance. But before I could respond, Carla was suddenly beside us, her timing so perfect it couldn't have been accidental. I know this is hard, Derek, but Elena deserves the truth. She deserves better than lies and half-truths. The way she said it with such righteous conviction made something click into place in my mind, and I realized that whatever game Carla was playing, it was far more complicated than just exposing Derek's alleged affair. It was about controlling the narrative, controlling me, and controlling what everyone believed about our family. You're right, Carla, I said quietly, watching her face carefully. I do deserve the truth. All of it. And for just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that looked almost like panic before she recovered her concerned sister expression. Of course, Elena, that's all I want for you, the complete truth, so you can make informed decisions about your future. But her voice had a slight tremor that hadn't been there before, and I knew Maya had been right.
There was definitely something Carla was hiding, and I was going to find out what it was. The week that followed felt like living in a parallel universe where everything looked normal on the surface, but nothing actually was. I went through the motions of my daily routine, teaching my third graders about multiplication tables and reading comprehension, while my mind churned through endless possibilities about Derek and Carla and secrets and lies. Every morning, I woke up hoping the previous Saturday had been some kind of nightmare, but then I'd see Derek sleeping on the couch in the living room, where he'd been banished since the baby shower, and reality would crash back down on me. Maya called me every day with updates from her unofficial investigation into my sister's recent behavior. I saw her at CVS yesterday buying prenatal vitamins, she reported on Tuesday afternoon, while I sat in my car outside the grocery store trying to work up the energy to go inside and pretend everything was fine. The information hit me like another puzzle piece clicking into place, because why would Carla need prenatal vitamins unless she was pregnant or trying to get pregnant? "Did she see you?" I asked Maya, who laughed grimly. "No. She was too busy looking around nervously, like she was afraid someone would recognize her. Elena, I've known your sister for 15 years, and I've never seen her look nervous about anything. She thrives on attention, but yesterday she was practically hiding behind her sunglasses." The image of Carla skulking around the pharmacy, trying to avoid being seen, was so foreign to everything I knew about my attention-seeking sister that it confirmed something significant was happening. Derek had been trying to have the conversation about Sophia and the hotel stay all week, but I kept putting him off, telling him I needed time to process Carla's accusations before I was ready to hear his explanation. But the truth was, I was afraid of what he might tell me, afraid that even if the affair wasn't as dramatic as Carla had made it sound, there might still be enough truth in her words to destroy what was left of my trust in him. Finally, on Wednesday night, I agreed to listen while Maya waited in the kitchen as moral support. The conference was real, Elena. You can check the company website. It was the regional sales meeting in Sacramento that I go to every year. Sophia was there because she's part of the team now, and yes, we stayed at the same hotel because that's where all the company people stay. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos from the conference sessions and group dinners. Look at the timestamps, Elena. We were in meetings all day and at company events every night. But then he hesitated, and I saw that flicker of guilt I'd been dreading. There was one night, though. After everyone else went to bed, Sophia and I sat in the hotel bar, talking about work stuff, but also personal things. She's been going through a divorce, and I told her about our fertility struggles, about how hard it's been watching you hurt every month when the tests were negative. His voice got quieter. I probably shared more than I should have, Elena, and maybe I was seeking comfort in the wrong place, but nothing romantic happened between us. I swear.
The explanation was both better and worse than I'd expected. Better because it wasn't the full-blown affair Carla had described, but worse because it revealed emotional intimacy that Derek had been sharing with another woman instead of with me. So, when Carla said she heard you talking about loving spending time with her and the hotel being perfect, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek winced. I probably did say something like that because it felt good to talk to someone who understood work stress and personal problems without judgment. That admission stung more than I wanted to let on because it meant Derek had been finding emotional support elsewhere while I'd been struggling through our fertility journey alone, thinking we were in it together. Why didn't you tell me about these conversations, Derek? Why did it have to be a secret? I asked, and he ran his hands through his hair in that frustrated gesture. Because I knew you'd be hurt, and I didn't want to add to your stress when you were already dealing with so much with the pregnancy and everything. Meanwhile, Maya had been conducting her own investigation into Carla's social media presence and found several telling details. She hasn't posted any full-body photos in over 2 months, Elena, and you know how your sister loves to show off her outfits. Maya scrolled through Carla's Instagram account on Thursday evening while we sat in my living room. Look at this. All headshots or carefully cropped photos that cut off at the chest. And when people comment asking why she's not posting outfit photos anymore, she just ignores them or changes the subject. Even more revealing was information Maya had gathered from mutual friends who'd noticed changes in Carla's behavior over the past few months. Jessica, from our book club, said Carla canceled their lunch plans 3 times, claiming she had stomach flu. And you know how Carla never misses a chance to go out and be social. Maya ticked off the evidence on her fingers. Plus, she's been avoiding her usual spin classes at the gym, telling people she pulled a muscle, but the trainer said she just stopped showing up without explanation. By Friday, I felt like I was drowning in suspicions and half-truths and circumstantial evidence that painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Derek's explanation about Sophia made sense, but it also revealed a level of emotional distance in our marriage that I hadn't fully acknowledged. And Carla's strange behavior, combined with the prenatal vitamins and avoidance of social situations, suggested Maya's pregnancy theory was more than just wild speculation. But I needed something concrete, something that would prove whether my sister was hiding what I thought she was hiding. I think we need to confront her directly, Maya said, as we sat in my car outside Carla's apartment building on Friday evening, not accusingly, but casually. See how she reacts when pregnancy comes up in conversation. The plan made my stomach churn because I'd never been good at confrontation, had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, but this was too important to let slide. Mom's having dinner for the family on Sunday anyway, I said finally. Maybe that's the perfect opportunity to watch Carla's behavior up close. Perfect, Maya agreed. Natural setting, controlled environment, and if she is pregnant, she'll have to navigate avoiding alcohol and certain foods again, which will give us more evidence. She paused, looking at me carefully. Elena, are you prepared for what we might discover? Because if Carla is pregnant and she's been hiding it while causing chaos about Derek's supposed affair, that suggests a level of manipulation that goes beyond normal sibling rivalry. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo of suspicion and doubt. I'm prepared, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. I need to know what's really going on, Maya, because something about this whole situation feels orchestrated, and I'm tired of being the only one in the dark about my own life. Sunday dinner at Mom's house had always been a command performance, where family drama was expected to be checked at the door in favor of maintaining the illusion that we were a normal, happy family who enjoyed each other's company. But tonight, the air felt thick with unspoken tensions and carefully avoided topics as we gathered around the dining room table that Mom had set with her good china, as if formal place settings could somehow elevate the occasion above the chaos of the past week. Derek had asked if he should come, and I'd told him no, partly because I wanted to observe Carla without the distraction of his presence, but mostly because I was still not ready to pretend everything was normal between us when I was still processing his admission about finding emotional comfort with Sophia instead of with me. Maya had offered for moral support, but I'd decided this needed to be family only, at least until I had a better sense of what I was dealing with. Carla arrived exactly on time, which was unusual since she typically ran at least 15 minutes late to everything. But today, she appeared promptly at 6, wearing another flowing dress, this one in deep green, that successfully disguised her silhouette while making her look appropriately dressed for a family dinner. She hugged Mom and made the usual small talk about traffic and her week at work. But I noticed she avoided meeting my eyes directly, and when she did look at me, it was with an expression of exaggerated concern that felt performative. Ryan arrived a few minutes later carrying flowers for Mom and a bottle of wine that he immediately offered to open. I thought we could all use a little relaxation after last week, he said with the kind of forced joyfulness that meant Mom had briefed him on maintaining a positive atmosphere. This is a really nice Pinot Grigio that I've been saving for a special occasion. I watched Carla's face as he spoke about the wine and saw her smile tighten almost imperceptibly before she turned to help Mom in the kitchen, claiming she wanted to check on the roast. "How are you feeling, Elena?" Ryan asked, settling into the chair across from me. "This has to be incredibly stressful for you, especially with the baby and everything." His genuine concern was a relief after a week of people either avoiding the topic entirely or asking probing questions disguised as sympathy. "I'm taking it one day at a time," I replied honestly, trying to focus on staying healthy and figuring out what's true and what isn't. From the kitchen, I could hear Mom and Carla talking in low voices, but I caught fragments of their conversation. "You need to be more careful," Mom was saying,
and Carla's response was too quiet to make out, but her tone sounded defensive. When they returned to the dining room, Mom was carrying the wine glasses and Carla had the salad bowl, but I noticed Carla immediately sat down without accepting the glass of wine that Ryan poured for everyone else. "Aren't you drinking tonight, Car?" Ryan asked with mild surprise. "You usually love wine with dinner." And I watched my sister's face as she scrambled for an explanation. "I'm on antibiotics for a sinus infection," she said quickly, touching her nose for emphasis. "The doctor said no alcohol for 10 days. It was a smooth lie delivered with just enough detail to be believable, but Maya had trained me to watch for over-explanation, and Carla's addition of the specific 10-day time frame felt like gilding the lily. Throughout dinner, I found myself cataloging small details. The way Carla pushed the Caesar salad around her plate without eating any, commenting that she wasn't very hungry tonight. How she declined Mom's offer of coffee after the meal, saying caffeine was bothering her stomach lately. The way she kept shifting in her chair like she couldn't get comfortable, and periodically pressing her hand to her lower back when she thought no one was looking. All behaviors I recognized from my own early pregnancy experience. "So, Ryan," I said during a lull in conversation about Mom's new neighbor, "are you and Carla still talking about maybe having kids someday?" It was a casual question, the kind that came up naturally at family dinners, but I watched Carla's fork freeze halfway to her mouth and saw her exchange a quick glance with Mom before she recovered her composure. "We've talked about it, but there's no rush," Ryan said easily. "We want to get engaged first, maybe take that trip to Europe we've been planning." "Oh, that sounds wonderful," I continued, maintaining my innocent tone. "I was just thinking about how exciting it would be for our kids to grow up as cousins. And I read this article recently about the benefits of prenatal vitamins, even when you're just thinking about trying to conceive." The comment was pointed enough that Carla's head snapped up and I saw her face go pale before she attempted a laugh. "Elena, you're becoming such a pregnancy expert these days. I'm sure you'll have lots of advice for all of us when the time comes." But her voice had a slight tremor, and she immediately took a large sip of water like her mouth had gone dry. "Speaking of pregnancy vitamins," Mom interjected, and I could tell she was trying to steer the conversation away from dangerous territory. "Have you been taking those fancy organic ones the doctor recommended, Elena? They're supposed to be better for the baby's development." It was a transparent attempt at deflection, but it gave Carla a chance to excuse herself to the bathroom, where she disappeared for longer than necessary. When she returned, her lipstick had been freshly applied, and she'd clearly taken a moment to compose herself, but there was a brittleness to her smile that hadn't been there before. "Sorry about that," she said, settling back into her chair. "I think I might be getting the same bug that's been going around my office." It was another lie stacked on top of the antibiotic excuse, and I realized Carla was building an elaborate fiction to explain away symptoms that had a much simpler explanation. As the evening wound down and Ryan helped Mom clear the dishes, Carla finally looked directly at me for the first time all night. "Elena, I hope you know that what I did last week at your shower was because I love you and want what's best for you." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "I know the timing was terrible, but I couldn't keep quiet about Derek's affair when you deserve so much better." The word affair hung in the air between us, and I realized she was still committed to her version of events, still pushing the narrative that would keep attention focused on Derek's alleged betrayal instead of her own secrets. "I appreciate your concern, Carla," I replied carefully, "but I'm starting to think there might be more to the story than any of us realized." It was a subtle warning that I was no longer accepting everything at face value, and I saw Carla's understanding flash in her eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like panic. "What do you mean?" she asked, but her voice was too casual, too controlled. "I just mean that sometimes the truth is more complicated than it first appears, and secrets have a way of coming out eventually." The drive home gave me time to process everything I had observed, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I was convinced that Maya had been right. Carla was definitely pregnant and had been hiding it for months, which explained her conservative clothing choices, her food and alcohol avoidance, and her general nervousness about being scrutinized too closely. But more disturbing was the growing certainty that her pregnancy revelation at my baby shower hadn't been spontaneous protective instinct, but a calculated move to deflect attention from her own situation. And that suggested a level of manipulation that made me question everything I thought I knew about my sister's motivations and her relationship with my husband. Tuesday morning brought the breakthrough I'd been dreading when Maya called me during my lunch break with news that made my sandwich taste like cardboard in my mouth. Elena, I was at the coffee shop near the gym and overheard two women talking about seeing your sister with some guy who looked exactly like Derek. Her voice was tight with the kind of controlled anger that meant she was trying not to explode. They said it was about 3 months ago, and they were definitely not acting like brother and sister-in-law, if you know what I mean. The timeline hit me like a physical blow because 3 months ago was right around when Derek had started staying late at work more often, when he had begun taking those mysterious phone calls in the other room, when I had attributed his distance to work stress and my own pregnancy anxiety, never imagining that the stress might be coming from an entirely different source. Did they say anything else, Maya? Anything specific about what they saw? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. They said the woman looked like she was trying not to be seen, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, but one of them recognized her from her yoga class. They said she looked like she might be pregnant, that she had that early pregnancy glow and was wearing loose clothes to hide it. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity.
Painting a picture I'd been trying not to see, even as the evidence mounted around me like a wall I could no longer pretend didn't exist. That evening, I sat in my car outside Derek's office building, waiting for him to come out so I could see his face when I asked him about Carla, so I could watch his reaction without the safety net of our familiar home environment where he might feel more comfortable lying to me. When he emerged at 6:15, looking tired and distracted, I rolled down my window and called his name, watching him startled, then approached the car with obvious reluctance written across his features. "Elena, what are you doing here? You could have just called if you needed something," he said, leaning down to the window but not getting in the car, and I noticed he was scanning the parking lot like he was worried about who might see us talking. "I wanted to ask you something, Derek, and I wanted to see your face when you answered." I kept my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Have you ever been alone with Carla, outside of family gatherings?" The question hung in the air between us, and I watched Derek's face cycle through surprise, confusion, and something that looked disturbingly like guilt before he settled on defensive. "What kind of question is that, Elena? Of course I've been alone with your sister occasionally, if she needed help moving something or if we ran into each other somewhere, but nothing inappropriate has ever happened between us." But his denial felt rehearsed, and his eyes weren't meeting mine the way they usually did when he was telling the truth. "I'm not asking about inappropriate, Derek. I'm asking about being alone with her, having private conversations, the kind where you might share things about our marriage, about our fertility struggles, about hotel stays and work trips." I watched his face carefully and saw his jaw clench the way it did when he was caught in something he didn't want to admit. "Carla has always been easy to talk to, Elena. She's a good listener. And sometimes when you were going through the worst of the IVF failures, you were so sad all the time that I needed someone to talk to." That admission felt like another betrayal because it meant Derek had been seeking emotional support from my sister during some of the darkest moments of our marriage when I'd needed him most. And he'd been sharing our private struggles with the one person who would absolutely use that information against me later. "So you did have a relationship with Carla outside of family events?" I pressed. And Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Not a relationship, Elena, just conversations. She understood what we were going through because she could see how much the fertility issues were affecting our whole family." But there was something in his tone that suggested there was more to the story. And when I asked directly if he'd ever been to Carla's apartment or if she'd been to our house when I wasn't there, his hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "She came by once when you were at that weekend teaching conference," he finally admitted. "She said she wanted to borrow your good mixer for a party she was planning, and we ended up talking for a while about everything that was happening with the IVF and how hard it was to watch you struggle." The image of Derek and Carla alone in our house talking about our private pain while I was away, trusting them both completely, made me feel sick because I could see how it might have started innocently enough, with Carla offering a sympathetic ear and Derek grateful for someone who would listen without crying or getting upset the way I did.
But somewhere along the way, those conversations had evolved into something else, something that gave Carla intimate knowledge of Derek's business trips and hotel stays. And when he asked directly if he'd ever been to Carla's apartment or if she'd been to our house when I wasn't there, his hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She came by once when you were at that weekend teaching conference, he finally admitted. She said she wanted to borrow your good mixer for a party she was planning, and we ended up talking for a while about everything that was happening with the IVF and how hard it was to watch you struggle. The image of Derek and Carla alone in our house talking about our private pain while I was away, trusting them both completely, made me feel sick because I could see how it might have started innocently enough, with Carla offering a sympathetic ear and Derek grateful for someone who would listen without crying or getting upset the way I did. But somewhere along the way, those conversations had evolved into something else, something that gave Carla intimate knowledge of Derek's business trips and hotel stays. And when he asked directly if he'd ever been to Carla's apartment or if she'd been to our house when I wasn't there, his hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She came by once when you were at that weekend teaching conference, he finally admitted. She said she wanted to borrow your good mixer for a party she was planning, and we ended up talking for a while about everything that was happening with the IVF and how hard it was to watch you struggle. The image of Derek and Carla alone in our house talking about our private pain while I was away, trusting them both completely, made me feel sick because I could see how it might have started innocently enough, with Carla offering a sympathetic ear and Derek grateful for someone who would listen without crying or getting upset the way I did. But somewhere along the way, those conversations had evolved into something else, something that gave Carla intimate knowledge of Derek's business trips and hotel stays. And when he asked directly if he'd ever been to Carla's apartment or if she'd been to our house when I wasn't there, his hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She came by once when you were at that weekend teaching conference, he finally admitted. She said she wanted to borrow your good mixer for a party she was planning, and we ended up talking for a while about everything that was happening with the IVF and how hard it was to watch you struggle.
Yeah, so if you're new to keeping plants, try something like a snake plant or a ZZ plant. They're pretty easy to take care of. Voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. Because if you are, then we need to talk about why you didn't tell me. Of course I'm not pregnant, Ryan, Carla said, but she was looking at me instead of him, and I could see the panic building in her eyes as she realized her denials weren't working. Elena is just upset about what I told her about Derek, and she's trying to turn this around on me. But Derek was staring at her with an expression I'd never seen before, something between horror and recognition, and I knew my suspicions about his involvement were correct. Actually, Carla, I think the timing is interesting, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the way my heart was racing. Because if you are pregnant, and if you conceived around the time Derek was having his emotional crisis about our fertility struggles, then that would explain a lot about how you knew so much about his hotel stays and work trips. The implication was clear enough that everyone at the table understood what I was suggesting, and the silence that followed was deafening. Ryan pushed back from the table so hard his chair nearly toppled. "Are you telling me you're pregnant with his baby?" he said, pointing at Derek, whose face had gone ashen. "Is that what this is about, Carla? Have you been cheating on me with Elena's husband?" His voice was getting louder, and I could see the hurt and betrayal replacing the confusion in his eyes as he finally understood what he'd walked into. "It's not what you think," Carla said, finally abandoning her denials, but still trying to control the narrative. "It was just one time when we were both upset and lonely, and it didn't mean anything." But her admission hit the room like another explosion, and I watched Derek bury his head in his hands while Mom made a sound like she'd been physically struck, and Maya reached over to squeeze my arm in support. The truth was finally out there, ugly and devastating and impossible to take back. And as I looked around the table at the wreckage of my family, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Because at least now I knew what I was dealing with, and I could finally stop trying to hold together relationships that had been built on lies and betrayal from the very beginning. The brunch ended with Ryan storming out after calling Carla every name I'd ever wanted to call her myself, and Derek following him to the parking lot where their raised voices carried back through my open windows, creating a soundtrack of male rage and broken trust that felt oddly satisfying after weeks of whispered conversations and careful avoidance of the truth. Mom sat at my dining room table crying into her napkin while Carla alternated between defensive anger and desperate attempts to minimize what had just happened.
It was one mistake, Elena, one moment of weakness when we were both upset and lonely, and it didn't mean anything to either of us. We both regretted it immediately. But her admission hit the room like another explosion. And I watched Derek bury his head in his hands while Mom made a sound like she'd been physically struck, and Maya reached over to squeeze my arm in support. The truth was finally out there, ugly and devastating and impossible to take back. And as I looked around the table at the wreckage of my family, I felt something I hadn't expected, relief. Because at least now I knew what I was dealing with, and I could finally stop trying to hold together relationships that had been built on lies and betrayal from the very beginning. The brunch ended with Ryan storming out after calling Carla every name I'd ever wanted to call her myself, and Derek following him to the parking lot where their raised voices carried back through my open windows, creating a soundtrack of male rage and broken trust that felt oddly satisfying after weeks of whispered conversations and careful avoidance of the truth. Mom sat at my dining room table crying into her napkin while Carla alternated between defensive anger and desperate attempts to minimize what had just happened. It was one mistake, Elena, one moment of weakness when we were both vulnerable, and it didn't mean anything to either of us. We both regretted it immediately. But her words felt hollow, especially when I remembered all the times over the past few months when she'd looked at Derek with what I'd thought was simple dislike, but now recognized as the complicated mixture of guilt and attraction that comes from shared secrets. Maya helped me clear the table while Carla and Mom continued their hushed conversation in the living room, probably trying to figure out how to contain the damage and spin the narrative in a way that would make Carla look like the victim instead of the architect of this mess. But I was beyond caring about their damage control, because finally knowing the truth felt like being able to breathe again after months of suffocating on other people's lies and betrayal. Derek returned from the parking lot looking defeated and older than I'd ever seen him. "Elena, we need to talk," he said quietly, "about everything, about what happened with Carla and what it means for us." But I shook my head because I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, wasn't ready to hear his explanations or apologies or promises to do better when I was still processing the magnitude of what they and my sister had done to me while I was struggling with fertility issues and pregnancy fears. "Not today, Derek," I said, keeping my voice calm and final. "Today, I need you to leave and give me space to figure out what comes next." I could see him wanting to argue, to push for the kind of immediate resolution that would make him feel less guilty. But Maya stepped closer to me in a gesture of support that made it clear he wasn't going to get what he wanted. "Elena's right, Derek. You need to go and let her process this without pressure from you." After Derek left, Mom tried to mediate, the way she always did when family drama threatened to tear apart her carefully maintained illusion of unity. "Elena, you have to understand that people make mistakes, especially when they're under stress. Your sister feels terrible about what happened, and Derek obviously regrets it too, so maybe we can find a way to work through this for the sake of the baby." But I was done prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own well-being, done pretending that forgiveness was always the right choice when some betrayals were too fundamental to overcome. "Mom, there isn't going to be any working through this," I said quietly. "Carla destroyed my baby shower to hide her own pregnancy with my husband's child, and Derek chose to betray me with my own sister during the worst period of our marriage. There's no coming back from that." The finality in my voice seemed to shock Mom into silence, and I watched her realize that this wasn't going to be one of those family dramas that got smoothed over with time and forced holiday gatherings. Carla tried one more time to control the narrative. "Elena, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. We can co-parent the babies as cousins, and no one outside the family ever has to know what really happened." But her suggestion was so tone-deaf, so completely divorced from the reality of what she'd done, that I almost laughed. "Get out, Carla," I said, and my voice was steadier than I'd expected. "Get out of my house and don't come back until you're ready to take full responsibility for what you've done without trying to minimize it or blame anyone else." She started to protest, but Maya moved to the front.
Had betrayed her mother with her aunt, that her extended family was fractured by secrets and lies and manipulation. All she knew was warmth and milk, and the sound of my voice promising her that she would grow up different. "You will never have to question whether you're loved," I whispered to her as we drove away from the hospital toward our new life. "You will never have to wonder if the people who claim to care about you are telling the truth, Because I will teach you to recognize real love from performed love, healthy relationships from toxic ones, and your own worth from other people's opinions of it. The apartment felt like a sanctuary when we walked through the door together. Everything arranged exactly the way I wanted it, without compromise or negotiation, or the exhausting work of maintaining peace with people who confused drama for intimacy and chaos for passion. The nursery was ready, with its wildflower mural and carefully chosen books about strong girls and independent women and the importance of trusting your own instincts even when everyone around you insists you're wrong. Over the following weeks, I established routines that had nothing to do with anyone else's schedule or needs or expectations. I fed Sophia when she was hungry, not when some expert said I should. I slept when she slept, regardless of what time it was. I accepted help from people who offered it freely and refused guilt trips from people who thought I should be more forgiving, more understanding, more willing to sacrifice my peace for their comfort. 3 months after Sophia was born, Derek asked through his lawyer if he could have supervised visits, and I agreed, because she deserved the chance to know her father, even if that relationship would be complicated by his choices. But I insisted on neutral territory and professional supervision because trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself just because a baby is involved. And I was committed to protecting both of us from further emotional damage. Mom tried one more time to orchestrate a family reconciliation, sending me a card on Sophia's 3-month birthday with a photo of herself holding a baby that I realized with shock was Carla's son, born just 6 weeks after my daughter. But I felt nothing looking at the image except relief that I was no longer part of that particular cycle of dysfunction and manipulation that would undoubtedly continue for years to come, with or without my participation. Instead, I built a new family from the people who had proven themselves worthy of the title. Maya, who became Sophia's unofficial aunt, and Mrs. Chen, who insisted on being called Grandma, and the other mothers I met at the library story time who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's destructive behavior, and that blood relation doesn't automatically entitle someone to access to your life or your child. As I write this, Sophia is sleeping in her crib, surrounded by the wildflower mural that represents growth and resilience and the kind of beauty that thrives despite difficult conditions. And I know that whatever challenges we face together, they will be honest challenges, met with authentic responses, not the exhausting theater of maintaining relationships built on secrets and lies, and the false premise that family loyalty requires tolerating betrayal. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old and a single mother, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in other people's drama and choose instead to build something true and beautiful and entirely your own. Because family isn't defined by DNA or marriage certificates or shared history. It's defined by respect and honesty and the kind of love that doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make other people comfortable. And every night when I hold my daughter and watch her sleep, I promise her that she will grow up knowing the difference between love that lifts you up and love that tears you down, and that she will never settle for anything less than she deserves, because I finally learned to do the same.
And opened it in a gesture that was both polite and unmistakably firm. I think Elena's been clear about what she needs right now. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls and text messages as news of the confrontation spread through our extended family and friend group, creating the kind of gossip and speculation that would have horrified me just a week earlier, but now felt like a small price to pay for finally living in truth instead of lies. Maya fielded most of the calls, screening out the merely curious and connecting me only with people who offered genuine support without expecting me to explain or justify my decisions. Ryan called on Tuesday to apologize for not seeing what was happening sooner and to let me know he'd ended his relationship with Carla, effective immediately. I should have noticed the signs, Elena. Should have questioned why she was being so secretive lately. His voice was heavy with the kind of regret that comes from realizing you've been played. I hope you know that I had no idea what was going on, and if I had, I would have told you immediately. Derek sent a series of increasingly desperate text messages, asking for a chance to explain, wanting to talk about our future and the baby. But I wasn't ready for those conversations yet. Wasn't sure I would ever be ready to hear him try to justify the unjustifiable. So I turned off my phone and focused on the practical aspects of my new reality, like whether I wanted to stay in the house we'd shared or find somewhere new to start over. Maya helped me contact a lawyer to understand my options regarding divorce and custody and financial settlements, because whatever else happened, I was determined to protect myself and my baby from any further manipulation or emotional damage. The lawyer was kind, but direct about the complexities of divorce during pregnancy and the challenges of co-parenting with someone who had betrayed trust so fundamentally. By the end of the week, I felt like I was finally seeing my life clearly for the first time in months, understanding that the marriage I'd thought I was saving had been built on a foundation of lies and half-truths that made it impossible to sustain, and that the family I'd been trying to preserve had never actually existed except in my own wishful thinking. But instead of feeling devastated by these realizations, I felt oddly liberated. Because finally, I could stop trying to hold together relationships that were broken beyond repair and start building something new, something honest, something that would give my daughter a better example of what she should expect from the people who claimed to love her. And for the first time since my baby shower, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future, even though it looked nothing like what I'd planned. 4 months later, I stood in the nursery of my new apartment, painting the final touches on a mural of wildflowers that stretched across the wall behind the crib, the soft yellow and pink petals seeming to dance in the afternoon light that streamed through windows I'd chosen specifically because they faced east, toward the sunrise, instead of west, toward endings. The apartment was smaller than the house I'd shared with Derek, but it felt infinitely larger because every corner held only my choices, my dreams, my vision of what life could be when it wasn't built on other people's lies. The divorce had been finalized just 2 weeks before my due date, with Derek agreeing to generous child support and visitation rights that would be supervised until our daughter was old enough to decide for herself what kind of relationship she wanted with a father who had proven himself capable of such fundamental betrayal. I'd kept my maiden name for her birth certificate, wanting her to carry only my family's strength and resilience, not the complicated inheritance that would come with Derek's surname. Maya had been with me through every contraction, every push, every moment of the 22-hour labor that brought Sophia Grace into the world on a Tuesday morning when the hospital room was filled with golden light and the kind of peace I hadn't felt since before my baby shower exploded my old life into pieces too small to reassemble. She was perfect in the way all babies are, but more than that, she was wholly mine. Untouched by the drama and betrayal that had preceded her arrival, a clean slate in human form. The first photo I sent was to my carefully curated list of people who had earned the right to share in this joy.
Maya, of course, and Mrs. Chen, who had brought me homemade soup every week after I moved out, and my college roommate, Jennifer, who had driven 3 hours just to help me pack my things from the house Derek and I had shared, and a few other friends who had proven themselves capable of love without conditions or expectations or hidden agendas.
I didn't send the photo to Mom, who had spent the past 4 months trying to convince me to forgive Derek and Carla for the sake of family unity, as if their betrayal was somehow less significant than my refusal to pretend it hadn't happened. And I definitely didn't send it to Derek, even though he was legally entitled to know about Sophia's birth. Because I wanted these first few hours to be pure and untainted by his complicated emotions and guilty conscience. My phone buzzed with responses within minutes, messages of love and congratulations and offers to bring food or help with anything I needed. But the most meaningful came from Maya, who simply wrote, "She's perfect, Elena, and so are you for protecting her from all the toxicity. You deserve this happiness." And in that moment, I felt the final piece of my old life falling away, like a skin I'd outgrown, leaving behind something stronger and clearer and more authentically mine. 2 days later, as I was preparing to leave the hospital, my phone lit up with a text from Carla, the first communication I'd received from her since the confrontation at my brunch. "I heard about the baby, Elena. I hope you know that I'm sorry for everything and that I love you both." But I deleted the message without responding because some apologies come too late and some bridges burn so completely that even acknowledging their existence gives them more power than they deserve. Instead, I focused on the weight of Sophia in my arms and the way she looked at me with dark eyes that seemed impossibly wise for someone who had been breathing independently for less than 72 hours. She didn't know yet that her family tree was complicated, that her
had betrayed her mother with her aunt, that her extended family was fractured by secrets and lies and manipulation. All she knew was warmth and milk and the sound of my voice promising her that she would grow up different. "You will never have to question whether you're loved," I whispered to her as we drove away from the hospital toward our new life. "You will never have to wonder if the people who claim to care about you are telling the truth, because I will teach you to recognize real love from performed love, healthy relationships from toxic ones, and your own worth from other people's opinions of it." The apartment felt like a sanctuary when we walked through the door together. Everything arranged exactly the way I wanted it, without compromise or negotiation, or the exhausting work of maintaining peace with people who confused drama for intimacy and chaos for passion. The nursery was ready, with its wildflower mural and carefully chosen books about strong girls and independent women and the importance of trusting your own instincts even when everyone around you insists you're wrong. Over the following weeks, I established routines that had nothing to do with anyone else's schedule or needs or expectations. I fed Sophia when she was hungry, not when some expert said I should. I slept when she slept, regardless of what time it was. I accepted help from people who offered it freely and refused guilt trips from people who thought I should be more forgiving, more understanding, more willing to sacrifice my peace for their comfort. 3 months after Sophia was born, Derek asked through his lawyer if he could have supervised visits, and I agreed, because she deserved the chance to know her father, even if that relationship would be complicated by his choices. But I insisted on neutral territory and professional supervision because trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself just because a baby is involved. And I was committed to protecting both of us from further emotional damage. Mom tried one more time to orchestrate a family reconciliation, sending me a card on Sophia's 3-month birthday with a photo of herself holding a baby that I realized with shock was Carla's son, born just 6 weeks after my daughter.
But I felt nothing looking at the image except relief that I was no longer part of that particular cycle of dysfunction and manipulation that would undoubtedly continue for years to come, with or without my participation. Instead, I built a new family from the people who had proven themselves worthy of the title. Maya, who became Sophia's unofficial aunt, and Mrs. Chen, who insisted on being called Grandma, and the other mothers I met at the library story time who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's destructive behavior, and that blood relation doesn't automatically entitle someone to access to your life or your child. As I write this, Sophia is sleeping in her crib, surrounded by the wildflower mural that represents growth and resilience and the kind of beauty that thrives despite difficult conditions. And I know that whatever challenges we face together, they will be honest challenges, met with authentic responses, not the exhausting theater of maintaining relationships built on secrets and lies, and the false premise that family loyalty requires tolerating betrayal. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old and a single mother, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in other people's drama and choose instead to build something true and beautiful and entirely your own. Because family isn't defined by DNA or marriage certificates or shared history. It's defined by respect and honesty and the kind of love that doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make other people comfortable. And every night when I hold my daughter and watch her sleep, I promise her that she will grow up knowing the difference between love that lifts you up and love that tears you down, and that she will never settle for anything less than she deserves, because I finally learned to do the same.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.